Right, if we're going to be factorizing a quadratic, this is how we do it. So we have to work out the factors. That's what we're doing. Remember, factors are things that you multiply together to get the result. So we're going to be thinking of two things, which when we multiply them together, we're going to get back to this x squared plus 2x minus 3. So here's the answer. I'm just going to work from the answer and work backwards to explain this process. So the answer is x plus 3 in one bracket times x minus 1. Now, how does this work? Well, let's look back at expanding. When we expand out, we're going to get, using the FOIL method, we're going to get x times x, which is x squared. We're going to get the outside, which is x times negative 1, which gives you negative x, or negative 1x. We're going to get the inside part, which is 3x. And lastly, we're going to get the last bit from each bracket, which is going to give us negative 3. So you can see that we have the x squared and the negative 3, and these two middle terms simplify together to become positive 2x, which is the middle part of the quadratic. So we can see by expanding it back out how these brackets come about. But how do we solve that in the first place? Well, if we look at these numbers here, these coefficients, we've got a 1 in front of the x squared, which we're always going to have for these examples, so you don't need to worry about that. We're going to have a plus 2, a positive 2, and we're going to have a negative 3 at the end. So we've got these two numbers here, that negative 1, you can see where that comes from. We've got the positive 3, and those two numbers will add together. So if we find these numbers in here, what numbers do we need where these question marks are to fit and bring us back that plus 2? Okay, so we're thinking to ourselves, we need two numbers that will add together to give us the plus 2, the coefficient of the x. Then we've got the negative 3, the number at the end. Now we can see we've got a plus 3 and a minus 1. These two numbers are multiplied together when we do our L from the FOIL to give us the negative 3. So that means we need these two numbers to multiply. So we're going to think of all the numbers that multiply together to give negative 3. Well, in this case there's only two options, negative 3 and positive 1, or positive 3 and negative 1. But they also need to add together. So the rule is they need to multiply to give negative 3 and add to give this plus 2. Well, only one of these options works. It's the 3 and the negative 1. So that means that our answers were 3 and negative 1. So that's where we got our answer from. So here's an example working through it from start to finish. Remember, we need the two numbers to times to give the negative 20 and plus to give the plus 8, the coefficient of x. So what numbers will go in our brackets? They have to be the factors of negative 20. Here's a list of all the possible factors of negative 20. Of course, we've got the same ones, but with the negative sign switched around. So we can put the negative on the other number, so it's your 6 possible combinations. But they also need to add to give us plus 8. So here's all the possible ones. That negative 8 looks good, but not quite. We need a plus 8, so it's going to be 10 and negative 2. You can see that the answer is just the same but negative. So when we saw that negative 8, we just thought, well, if we switch the numbers around, it will work. So the signs rather. So we've got 10 plus negative 2 gives us the 8. We'll just expand out to check it works, but it does. Here's what we did. So we needed two numbers that multiplied to give negative 20 and added to give positive 8. So that's our factorization. Right, now we're going to look at solving a quadratic, which is very similar. So here's my quadratic, x squared minus 2x minus 35, and we want to find when that's equal to 0. So the first thing we have to do is find the factors of negative 35. Here they are, of course the same pairs but with the negative sign switched. Which ones of these add to give that negative 2? Well, there we go. It's the negative 7 and positive 5. And if we put them in, that's our factorization done. Now remember, we have no sign in between these brackets, but it means times, so we're saying we need two brackets, one times the other, and it equals 0. So think to yourself, what numbers can you times together to get an answer of 0? Well, the answer is going to be 0 times, who cares, 0 times anything. Anything at all times 0 gives you 0. So if we just make one of these brackets equal to 0, so if we make it x minus 7 equals 0, then x has to equal 7, because 7 minus 7 is 0. So our answer for this equation is x equals 7. So I'll try it out. So putting it into the original equation, x squared minus 2x minus 35 equals 0. Let's check it works. 49 minus 14 minus 35 does equal 0. Alright, well that's good. That's our answer, x equals 7. But there's another way of thinking of it. 0 times anything, or anything times 0. So we could make the other bracket equal to 0. How do we do that? Well, if it's x plus 5, then we need x equals minus 5. Once again, I'll check this out. X squared minus 2x minus 35, does it equal 0? 25 plus 10 minus 35 is 0. So we have a second answer. So we just write this as the solutions to our quadratic are x equals 7 or x equals negative 5. That's the only two numbers that will work. Right, one more example, just a slight twist here. All the steps laid out in one go. First step, to solve this quadratic, it's not equal to 0. So we have to make it equal to 0. So just bring the 6 across the other side. So minusing 6 from both sides gives us x squared plus 11x plus 24 equals 0. Step 2 is factorize, like we've done a few times now. Two numbers that will multiply to give 24. So here's all the factors of 24. Here's all the positive ones. There will be the negatives as well, but we'll just do these first, because if we get the answer, we need the one that adds to 11, because 11x, there we go. X plus 8 and x plus 3 are the answers. Step 3 is to solve each bracket, because we want to find when this is equal to 0, so solve each bracket equal to 0. How do we make x plus 8 equal to 0? Well, we just take the negative, so it's going to be x equals negative 8. That's our first answer. And x equals negative 3, just the opposite of the number in the bracket. So that's our final result, and that's that.